Thank you so much. On behalf of the Ashton Heights Civic Association and the Lyon Park Citizens Association, I want to welcome you to our shared program Candidates Night. For the last 12 years, I have been president of the Ashton Heights Civic Association and also had the honor to be owner's rep for the Lyon Park Community Center board on the rehab of this historic building. And it is a wonderful experience to work on that and to work with the board and have this program here. I also want to point out AHCA's strong and shared relationship with our sister civic association, Lyon Park Association, for decades. We share more than a border along North Irving Street, but for a strong community and all the assets it entails. So I love when we do things like this together. I want to give special thanks to three people who put most of the work in this event tonight. First, Ashton Heights' Dave Schutz, who got the event moving, proposed the agenda and approach, and kept us all on focus and on time. And then the LPCA co-presidents, Thora Kolak and Kathleen McSweeney. A round of applause, please. They did all the work. I just got emails. I didn't do any work. Here I am. So my role tonight is not the moderator. My role is to be the stern, bearded professor that I am. So the rules for tonight. First, I've asked Dave Schutz to use a paint spray to enforce these rules on direction of the moderator. What this is not a Geraldo Rivera TV show. Or is it a shout-down match between viewpoints? We have very limited time. Candidates from federal and local government, which means questions were solicited from our respective civic association memberships, shortened and bundled together so we can get the most questions with the modest number of issues as times and candidates permit. So this is not all things to all people. So I have to review these rules that Kathleen McSweeney told me to review. So first, we ask everyone to be respectful of the candidates and one another, keeping in mind that everyone wants to hear questions and answers. So we ask the attendees to keep clapping and cheering and jeering after the final statements are completed. Do not interrupt the answers. The moderator will prompt you when it's time to show appreciation. We will be hearing from 3 groups of candidates tonight, and 30 minutes for the first, followed by a 40-minute Q&A, and we close the evening with a 30-minute Q&A with the school board candidates. I'm not done. There are a lot of rules here. It scares me. So, each group of candidates will be allowed 3 minutes to introduce themselves at the beginning of the Q&A period, 2 minutes to recap at the end, and to ask for our vote. For each question, each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to answer. We have a timekeeper, John Goldener. John? Looking good. Sober tonight? Everything's okay? So far. So far. I'm so damn proud of you. Excellent. He does? Does he have his clip-on beard tonight? Good. I'm feeling even better, more confident. Who will strictly enforce time. You will see him hold up cards to provide candidates when they have 1 minute and 30 seconds left to speak. When you see the red card, this is the candidate's cue to stop talking. Questions were solicited in advance. We do not have time to ask every question submitted. We have themes. Tonight's moderator is Kathleen McSweeney, LPCA co-president. Kathleen. We then will take at least one question from the in-person audience for each group of candidates. We encourage mask use, but masks for this event are optional. If you want one, there's one in the rear. The forum is being live streamed, so be careful what you say and gesture. That's my side guidance. And we will not be able to take questions from a remote audience. It is also being recorded by Michael Shea with Arlington Independent Media. We sincerely thank Michael Shea for his video and recording expertise and willingness to film and broadcast the event. We also like to thank Paul Showalter for taking care of logistics, including sound, and Dave Schutz for organizing and communicating with the candidates. Okay, and now Kathleen McSweeney. Take it away.
Thank you, Scott. And another hand for Scott Sklar, President of the Ashton Heights Civic Association. All right, can everyone hear all right? Wonderful. We are going to jump right into this. So what we're going to do is start out with the 3-minute personal statements from the candidates. We are going to start here to my right with Mr. Noah Simon, who's standing in for Congressman Don Beyer.
Great. Good evening. Thank you, Kathleen, Scott, Dave, thank you. My name is Noah Simon. I'm a volunteer with Congressman Don Beyer's campaign. As you can tell, I'm not the congressman. He does regret that he's not here tonight, but he did send me with a statement that he'd like me to read, and following that, I do look forward to answering your questions on his behalf. Good evening, and thank you for this invitation. I regret that scheduling conflicts prevented me from joining you tonight. I humbly and gratefully ask for your vote this November. My family has a robust tradition of public service from my grandmother to my wife, and I strive to follow their examples. In Congress, I have worked to lead every major effort to combat climate change, the electrification of automobility, carbon capture, and especially as the congressional champion for fusion energy, that's clean energy from seawater with no radioactive waste, the holy grail for cooling our planet. The James Webb Space Telescope is also a groundbreaking accomplishment, and I'm thrilled that I chaired the Science Committee as it launched. I chair the Joint Economic Committee as well, working to overcome persistent inequities in wealth and income. I also led the suicide prevention effort, which resulted in the summer's release of the nationwide hotline 988. And I continue to fight against assault weapons and against restrictions on a woman's right to oversee her own body. I have a strong record of effective constituent services. My office has resolved over 13,000 individual cases during my time in Congress. Serving in the U.S. Congress has been the greatest opportunity I have ever had to recognize the promise of every human being. Once again, I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you so much for being here tonight and having all of us here to talk a little bit about things that are important to you. My name is Karina Lipsman, and I'm the only Ukrainian-born refugee immigrant running for Congress in the entire country. I came here when I was 8 years old from Odessa, Ukraine, with my single mother and my grandparents. We moved to Baltimore City, didn't speak English, lived in low-income housing, survived on food stamps, went through the Baltimore public school system, and here I am today still. And as you can imagine, my first day of school was a little different from most kids because I didn't speak the language, so I could not communicate with anyone. And I remember all of the kids around me getting up and putting their right hand on their heart and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. And I didn't understand a single word, but I knew it was something that I wanted to be a part of. So when I turned 18, I became an American by choice. And during my swearing-in ceremony, when I recited the Pledge of Allegiance, I knew every single word, and I knew just how fortunate I was to have that opportunity that many around the world can only dream of. And I knew that I had to work hard. Nothing was given to me. We came here with nothing. And so I put myself through college in 3 years with a bachelor's in economics while I was working in the financial industry full-time. I then switched gears and joined the world of national defense and intelligence, where I was very fortunate to meet with global leaders, earn some of the highest security clearances, launch satellites, and also earn a master's in engineering from Johns Hopkins University. And that was just to prove that I could have a seat at the table. I resigned from my 14-year career in that industry this past January to run for Congress. I have lived the American dream, and I saw that dream slipping away, and that's why I decided to run. And far too often, I've been that little girl in the room, and here I am today again, as you guys can see. So during my career as a leading intelligence and defense expert, I was constantly forced to deal with older white men who knew what was best. And Don Beyer and the Democratic Party claim to support women's rights. However, I'm only one of 3 women who have ever been nominated for this seat, and none have been nominated from the Democratic Party. So I have worked too damn hard for Don Beyer not to show up today. And I understand conflicts happen, but I think it's important for us to be here. And so Virginia deserves to have better representation. and I will do better. You should vote for me because I am not an entrenched political career politician. I pump my own gas. I pay my own rent. I'm committed to working for you because I am you. 47% of this district is immigrant and minority. I'm an immigrant minority. I have lived the American dream, and I will fight to preserve that dream and not let that slip away for our children and our neighbors here in Northern Virginia. So I want to thank you all again and look forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Teddy Fikre, and I'm running as an independent. For me, this is truly a momentous occasion. 40 years ago, Arlington was the first place I lived in when I first came to America from Ethiopia. So this is a welcoming home occasion for me of sorts. I lived right off of Glebe Road, and then about a year later, we ended up moving to Delray, Alexandria. So there's a lot of reasons why I felt compelled to run. I'm kind of different from the average politician. I'm running, like I said, as an independent. I'm not taking a penny from corporations. And there's two underlying reasons that I felt compelled to run. One, as Karina mentioned, the American dream is something that is very fundamental to me. I escaped, my family and I escaped Ethiopia in 1983 and came here seeking a refuge from tyranny, from a bloodbath, from a polarized nation that eventually turned on itself. Sadly, I see this happening almost on a daily basis in America. The very same place that gave me shelter is kind of reverting to the form that Ethiopia that we fled from. And a lot of times, the underlying reason is because people feel a vast sense of hopelessness. There's income inequalities, and sadly, a lot of times politics gets in the way of our common humanity. And that's why I'm running as an independent. These two political parties, Republicans and Democrats, have been running the helm of America for the past, for centuries, and nothing is changing. If anything, we're going backwards. So what the founders envisioned especially for the House of Representatives, was a house of the people, the people's house. This is anything but. What we see now, Congress has become is a country club, where you have to have vast wealth in order to even have a chance to win. So here I am, like this politician after politician always says they're running an outside campaign. Well, this is the quintessential outsider campaign. I've talked at the last debate that I've raised $300 so far. I see that as a point of pride because our politics has become completely infected with all kinds of money. And where there's money to be made in politics, the people's work is not being done. So I'm running as independent for that reason, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with everyone here and hearing from you and also sharing my thoughts as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for respecting the time, candidates. So we are going to now go to some questions for our candidates, our congressional candidates. These questions, as Scott mentioned, were solicited via our listservs for Ashton Heights and Lyon Park. And so we're going to go ahead and ask what we've been asked to ask. So by federal law, all members of the U.S. Congress are elected to single-member districts. The incumbent has backed a measure to shift to multi-member congressional districts elected by ranked choice voting. Several states use this method now to choose delegates at the state level. Congressman Beyer has identified a 5-member district as optimal. Mr. Simon, when you answer this question, can you please explain why Congressman Beyer is advocating for this measure, and what or whom will it hurt, and what or whom will it help? Mr. Fikre and Ms. Lipsman, what do you think of this proposal? Do you support it? What are the pros and cons from your perspective? And we will start with Mr. Simon.
Thank you. Yes, so Congressman Beyer introduced, it's H.R. 3863. Any more information you want on this, just go to fairvote.org. The bill is completely outlined there. I only have 2 minutes. So what this is the question that Don Beyer gets the most in forums like this, and I've been to hundreds of these with him, is what can we do to bring the temperature down? What can we do to eliminate the polarization? So through that discussion, he came up with the idea of multi-member districts with ranked choice voting. So the example goes something like this. Right now, Northern Virginia is represented by 3 members of Congress, Jerry Connolly, Don Beyer, and Jennifer Wexton. They're all of the same political party. We know there are people that are not in that same political party that reside in the district. So the idea would be you rank, choice, vote your candidates. So if you like Ms. Lipsman, you put her first. But you like what we've said here tonight, you put Don Beyer second. It doesn't hurt the person that you put first, but the person who comes second has to go a little bit more towards the center. So it's a way to get politicians to not be on the fringes of things. This is certainly not going to solve everything. We're always going to have Twitter. We're going to have talk shows. We're going to have the fringes of society that find joy in being sort of playing at the 10-yard lines rather than the 50. But this is an idea that Don came up with to help reduce that polarization. Because if you have to get voters that are going to rank you not just first, but second, third, and fourth, you're probably going to trend towards the middle a little bit more.
So I've actually gone through a ranked choice voting convention, and that's how I got here. So even though I won my ranked choice convention, on the first ballot with over 61%, which is a record and a historical moment, this was not something that I really much enjoyed, and I truly oppose it. The federal government should not be mandating new types of voting systems, implementing a top-down approach or a one-size-fits-all solution. The states should decide what's best for themselves, and which in my opinion is the appropriate level of government by which these decisions are made. So I also have concerns about disenfranchising voters, because this is a complicated system to not only explain, but to also implement. Again, going firsthand, experiencing this firsthand. And I do believe that the idea of having theoretically positive and encouraging elections with a third-party system, but we've also seen races such as Maine and other states where politics will be politics, and not everyone is going to be nicer to each other, and using the ranked choice voting is not always going to solve our problems. So states should be administering their elections and not be afraid that the federal government is going to take over. So let's be clear, the federal government has made costs and inflation far worse. So I think we should be very cautious about any sort of miracle cures that the federal government has to offer us these days, and ranked choice voting is part of that. So federal representatives should be focused on issues facing the district and hearing from constituents, not trying to convince voters how to vote. I plan to always focus on what I'm hearing from the constituents and improving their lives in the halls of Congress. Thank you.
It sounds like a good idea, but I think it's kind of addressing the symptom and not necessarily the underlying cause. The underlying cause is these two political parties that have completely monopolized power in D.C. for decades, if not centuries. And so introducing ranked choice voting just further codifies the status quo. It doesn't really give voters any options. When you consider that more than 50% of Americans who continue to vote, by the way, there's a lot of people that just stop voting because they feel like they're not being represented. So when you consider that even within the voting population, that the people that still have faith in the system and continue to vote, more than 50% are independent. That means the majority of Americans are not being represented by either party. So I think the better way, and the other part of it too is we can't keep expecting change to come from DC. There's a lot to be said about individual choices. We as Americans at the end of the day have to make decisions that will benefit us. So if we feel as though the status quo is not working, we can't continue to work for the status quo and then expecting something different to come along. So we must make the choice to either declare our independence from these parties or back independent candidates, or do stuff where we live that actually empowers us instead of hoping and changing for change to come from DC. So overall, if my position on this is ranked choice work, I believe is a good option, but not if you just maintain the status quo of just these two political parties having complete stranglehold on power, and then there's not leaving any options for independents to compete in elections, whether it's national, local, or state level. Thank you.
Thank you. We were getting a message that the live feed was not being able to be heard or seen, so we've moved it closer, and hopefully we'll get a message that that worked. And we also turned it up. All right, the current national and regional support system for low-income families includes Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, but called SNAP, child care subsidies, Supplemental Security Income Cash, or SSI, and housing assistance from HUD, among them. Eligibility for each of these cuts off sharply at some point as incomes rise, often leading to an actual loss of available funds to the family, earning more and having less. As a result, there can be a disincentive to earning more. What are your plans for assisting working families that would help with this so-called cliff effect? We will start with Mr. Fikre.
Thank you. So as a first-generation immigrant, that was actually benefited at one point when my father was sick from cancer, from welfare, and from food assistance. Of course, I support this program. There's a lot of poverty in America, so we have to do more to fortify it so that people are not being left out in the cold. But as I said earlier, a lot of what we need to do, though, is not about just sending our resources and our tax revenues to DC and expecting that change to come back to us. What could help a lot more is to empower people, not to give handouts out. There's a place for a safety net, obviously, but a lot more transformative change happens when people that are living in impoverished areas are able to become entrepreneurs, when businesses are being built up in the places where we live, especially in low-income areas. One of the places I really camped out at when I was campaigning and getting signatures was in Delray. Delray's thriving because you have a bunch of local businesses. Compare that to go about 2 miles down the road where there's low-income housing. There's virtually no businesses that are within native to that area. So that's what we need. We need to be able to empower our communities, and a lot of that, again, goes back to the decisions that we as consumers make as well. We could expect some assistance from DC in terms of empowerment zones and low interest loans, but at the end of the day, it's the decisions that we make as consumers as well in order to reinvest the money where we live. Thank you.
So this is a very personal issue to me because, as I mentioned before, when we first came to this country, we survived on food stamps. And so when my single mother and I came here, we lived in low-income housing. We had to rely on the government to help us to get ourselves on our feet. And so I remember going to the grocery store every single day with my mom and checking if the food was still there and checking if inflation had taken over, because that's what we experienced in the Soviet Union. And so for a decade, my mother worked so hard to make just enough money and stay on government assistance. But she knew that if she pushed herself, went out and made more, and started to climb the ladder, then boom. Once you cross the threshold where you're still very much considered poor, you're cut off from government benefits. And this is how the government traps you. This is how the government keeps you dependent on them and keeps you down and holds you down. And it's time for the government to take their foot off the backs of our poorest citizens. The policies surrounding welfare and government assistance hit our immigrants and minority communities the hardest. And as a minority immigrant, and not someone who has wealth or family wealth or hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, I can speak to this struggle personally. As your Congresswoman, I will fight to reform these programs that will allow families to seek a better life, to seek a higher paying job, and transition to not cut off, but allow for a gradual decline of benefits as their income increases, but will never leave them high and dry. So depriving and punishing those who want a more comfortable lifestyle for themselves, for their families, is unacceptable. People want to live better lives. That's why they come to this country. This is the greatest country in the world. And they want to do it on their own. They want to make something of themselves, and they need those opportunities provided to them. So the government is supposed to work for us, we the people. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of out-of-touch politicians taking this for granted. So with all due respect to your boss, he works for us and not the other way around. So we need change in Washington. Thank you.
So by day, I'm Congressman Don Beyer's district director, and I can assure you, we're in the business of constituent services, and he's quite clear who he works for. And I'm not sure who the hundreds of millions of dollars, whose bank account that's in, but it's certainly not my boss. In terms of the question, Congressman Beyer was the chief sponsor of the child tax credit in the third COVID bill. And he was so pleased that that made it in there, but more disappointed that it then expired. It immediately took millions of families and kids out of poverty, and that was not extended. He continues to work towards that as a major priority. The other one is increasing eligibility for SNAP. 4% of our district is on SNAP. That might not seem like a lot unless you're that family. 7% of the 8th Congressional District is under the poverty line. That's an awful lot of people. The other piece is SSDI, so Social Security Disability Insurance. This comes from the constituent service that Congressman Beyer does. The entire job is about looking through the lens of other people, and he's learned that. We had constituents come to us to say they were on SSDI, their son had a disability. They bought a car, and their benefit reduced because the car was considered income and an asset. That to him didn't make sense. So he's introduced a bill to change something like that. And the final piece is Medicaid expansion. So when Congressman Beyer was Lieutenant Governor of Virginia for 8 years, he worked hard at this all the way back in the 90s, and thankfully it came through. So he thinks those 4 things can really contribute to eliminating this cliff that Kathleen referred to.
So now we have time to take a question from our live audience. Is there anybody who has a question? Please show me your hands. Surely someone must have a question for the congressional candidates. Did you want to ask? All right. Don't be shy. I thought I saw a hand back here. All right, neither have I. It's a little shocking. All right. As you, then what I'd like to do then is go to closing statements. We're going to start with Ms. Lipsman.
Thank you. So again, thank you for having me tonight. Thank you for being here. I'm a little disappointed that our elected official didn't make it and acknowledge the people of our district, and we deserve to hear directly from him. So at the last forum, he showed up well into the first panel and left right away without answering any of your questions. Where's Don Beyer? He's not here. He's not anywhere. I've been to over a dozen back-to-school nights, 38 farmers markets and counting, countless fairs, exhibits, memorials, and community events. Yet despite his lack of presence, I continue to hear promises made by him and now his staff. It's nice that Don Beyer sent someone who clearly has been in the political world for decades, and I could have done the same thing. I could have had any one of my staff who has this kind of experience sit here on my behalf, but I know that you're not voting for them, you're voting for me. And so I'm sure Mr. Simon, and I've talked to Mr. Simon, is a wonderful human being, but with all due respect, either Don Beyer should be sitting here in this seat or lose his seat in Congress. I resigned from my career to serve you, and Don Beyer can't even show up. You deserve better. Northern Virginia deserves better, which is why you should vote for me on November 8th. If you can take away one thing from today, it's that I'm actually here. So does it mean that I can automatically have your support? No. I will work hard to earn your support. I will listen to every one of you, and I will make sure that your voices are heard in the halls of Congress, and I would be humbled to earn your support. I have struggled through everything that I earned in my life. I don't have family legacy wealth, nor do most of the people in this district. And it's time for change. It's time for a fighter. It's time for someone who will not sit back and let the political elite make promises and break them and not be held accountable. I will keep my promises to you, and I will keep my promises to Northern Virginia. And if I don't, I ask that you vote me out of office. So I encourage you to visit karinaforcongress.com to learn more. And by the way, if you can let your boss know not to take up my signs and replace them with his own, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces. As you recall, just this summer, Congressman Beyer's office was at this table in these seats on a panel. And then prior to that, he was at Ashton Heights as the keynote speaker at your Civic Association meeting. Congressman Beyer has never gone negative in any of his campaigns, and that's certainly not going to start tonight. There are 800,000 people in the 8th Congressional District. It's 66 square miles. It goes from McLean to Fort Belvoir. You can imagine what kind of schedule he keeps. I can assure you he's not outside taking yard signs up. These are among the more challenging times in American history. Our country is the most divided it's been in our lifetime. Many of us worry whether our democracy can survive. This is Congressman Beyer's statement, by the way. I don't have time to detail the mountains we must climb: climate change, immigration reform, income and wealth concentration, the denial of personal freedom to manage your own bodies, to decide who you love, gun violence, anxiety and depression in our young people, and the deterioration of trust in so many of our institutions. But I'm an eternal optimist. Our American exceptionalism was built on our confidence that we can overcome any challenge with courage, faith, and goodwill. I'm determined to contribute all I can in every way possible to the abundant solutions before us. None will be easy, but all will be possible. Our political processes are painfully slow, made the slower by endless political games. I pledge always to put people over politics. I'm here to serve you as best as I possibly can, and I'm grateful for the honor to represent you every day. I once again ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you again for having me here. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that really inspired me to run is that I feel as though regular people, people that wake up every day trying to make ends meet, our voices are not being heard anymore. We're not being represented. What we have in D.C. is effectively a duopoly that's not paying any attention to us. I'm a political outsider as they come. I speak from the heart. I don't have canned speeches. I don't have expensive staffers. In fact, all the staffers that I have are volunteers who volunteer on their own time. So most of us, in fact, over I think 87% of Americans have a disapproval rating of Congress. This is bordering on COVID popularity, but yet we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So for me, what compelled me to run is I got tired of raging against the machine, being angry at the status quo. It's not enough to be against something. You have to actually stand up and make your voice count and stand up and say what you believe in and be a part of the solution. I have a 3-year-old son. When I tell him one of these days that what his dad was about, is I didn't want it to be about what I was against. It's what I'm for. And our political discourse these days is all about always about what people are against. And in that process, we're losing a sense of our common humanity. And that's really the greatest danger facing America. Beyond climate change, beyond COVID-19, is the sense of dissolution that's being inspired by disillusionment for the future. So I'm here to represent you because I am you. I don't have to feel your pain. I live your reality every day. It's time for us to get beyond us versus them and realize that we're all in this together. And that's why I'm running for Congress. My name is Teddy Fikre, and you can find out more at my website, which is www.fikre4va.com. Thank you, and have a blessed day.
Dave, I realized I was thinking we were running late, but do we have all of our county board candidates here? We do? Okay. I want to invite everyone to give another round of applause to our... Thank you so much for being here tonight, and there is literature on the back table from all the candidates, so please make sure you pick it up and take it on your way out. Thank you very much. So if I